Welcome to the Village of Bartlett Committee of the Whole meeting for August 21st, 2018. I call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Kammer?
Present.
Carbonaro?
Here.
Daney?
Here.
GABRENYA?
Here.
HOPKINS?
Here.
Ranky?
Here.
President Wallace.
Here. First item we have this evening under the Committee of the Whole meeting is Building and Zoning Chairman Hopkins.
Thank you, President Wallace. There's one item on our agenda tonight, and that's 1439 Snow Drift Circle variation request. The petitioners are requesting a 3'6" variation from the required 30-foot rear yard to construct a two-story addition to the rear of the house. The addition will architecturally match the existing home. The Zoning Board of Appeals reviewed the variation request, conducted a public hearing, and recommended approval at their August 2nd, 2018 meeting. And we're here to discuss whether we should forward this on to the village board for a vote. Mr. Plonzinski, do you have anything to add?
That covers it perfectly. Thank you.
Is there any questions from the board?
No.
Then we'll forward this on to the village board for a vote. Thank you. That's all we have under building and zoning tonight.
Thank you, Chairman Hopkins. Next item we have under the committee meeting this evening is Community and Economic Development, Chairman GABRENYA.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our first item has to do with the Bartlett Economic Development Assistance Program. And I would ask Tony, I would defer to Tony to explain the petitioner and the program.
Thank you, Chairman GABRENYA. As you recall, the BEDA program was created this fiscal year, just as of this May. It was funded with a $150,000 line item that created a program that could be used to create incentives for both new businesses as well as existing businesses seeking to expand their offerings. The program is targeted towards sales tax generating businesses too, I'd like to add. So our first application came in from a young man, AJ Tantuaya, who staff's been working with for the better part of this year in an effort to attract the village's first Indian restaurant. And through a partnership and working together with him and his family, they've purchased a unit in Westgate Commons Shopping Plaza, 772 West Bartlett Road, the former location of Sorel Salon. The unit had fallen into foreclosure prior to being purchased for redevelopment by the applicant's family. The petitioner had turned in cost estimates as required by the program, including estimates by S. Keki Construction, pricing out Mr. Tantuaya's project at approximately $115,000. Additionally, he has attached a quote for signage for his new business at an additional $3,986, bringing the total project cost to approximately $119,000. Part of his application, he turned in proposed floor plans, including the addition of a 320 square foot kitchen, dining room with 4 tables, with each table seating 4, a waiting area, and additionally, he's required to install an additional bathroom to meet current building code. Documentation for the improvements and the associated costs were submitted for your review. As the village's first applicant for this new program, Mr. Tantuaya had requested the maximum available incentive amount, which the village board set at $50,000, which would amount to approximately 42% of his build-out costs. Due to the finite amount of the $150,000 allocated for this BEDA program, as well as some other applications that we're anticipating, staff recommended a rebate in the amount of $25,000, which amounts to 21% of Mr. Tantuaya's total project costs. Mr. Tantuaya's request for this grant from the BEDA program was reviewed by the Economic Development Commission at its July 9th meeting. And after reviewing the applicant's proposed business plan and the request for assistance, the EDC recommended in favor of granting a rebate in the amount of $25,000. And one last thing to add, that the funds for this program works as a reimbursement program. So the applicant would have to go ahead and make all the improvements, and once that has been concluded, to turn in all the proof of payment, lien waivers, canceled checks, basically to prove that the work's been done, of course, to village code. And then on the back end of that, the $25,000 or whatever amount is recommended would be paid to him as a reimbursement. And again, Mr. Tantuaya is here tonight as well.
Who reviews the paperwork? Is it the community development or is it finance?
It's my economic development staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has the petitioner submitted a business plan to us?
He did not submit a full business plan. The EDC questioned him on some aspects of his business plan, and we've just discussed it informally, but he has not submitted a formal business plan as part of this application.
I think that I'd like to see that when this comes up for a vote. I mean, it's relatively uncharted waters. I'm excited about the concept. I can see myself going to the restaurant. At the same time, it's public money being used for a private purpose, so in order for me to support this, I'm going to need to see some significant benefit to the community, and I want to make sure that it isn't a purely speculative venture. And I know that that's hard to hear. I don't mean it in a negative way. It's just, I think that's my duty in this instance. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
I have a question for staff. Yeah, we frequent Westgate Commons Shopping Plaza quite often, and there is, in my opinion, I know that they meet all the requirements for parking and whatnot, but I have to tell you that it's great to see parking lots filled, but it's also very disturbing when you're there and you can't find a parking place. We have to park over by Dr. Gabrenya's. Don't park there? Yeah. Are we sure that with the new business coming in that we do have enough adequate parking by code? In my opinion, we don't, but I mean by code.
By my understanding, it's all shared parking, so even in the office portion of the development, people are allowed to park. That's accurate. It does, very busy center with a lot of successful restaurants in it, certainly gets parked up. So you're correct in that it meets code, but parking's an ongoing, can be addressed, but it should meet the code.
It's a good problem to have for the owners.
If I may, one of the largest draw to that center is a restaurant there that doesn't have evening or dinner hours.
Right.
And that would be the petitioner's bread and butter time as far as parking is concerned. So I think the fact that the largest draw there is not open at dinner would help alleviate some of that parking.
Well, let me ask this. Can it be suggested to the owners of the respective businesses there that the employees park in the rear of the building? I know that can't be officially enforced.
That's that, if I may speak to that.
Go ahead, please. Yeah, you're there, so please.
That is something I'm on the board. All of those are owned, and most of them are owner occupied.
Right.
And we talk about that at the condo association meetings, and that is the expectation, that employees park as far from the patrons' parking as possible to give the patrons an opportunity. So we do talk about that, and it's not enforceable, but it is peer pressurable, so to speak.
I wish I'd called you before the meeting. I wouldn't ask the question. I have
That's
the
okay.
answer. Thank you very much, staff.
I would just add one comment, kind of echoing Trustee Ranke. As a board, we kind of have to treat this as, obviously, it's the community's funding tax dollars. So we have to almost underwrite it like a bank would, which means that we're going to need to see some experience. We're going to need to see some evidence that it's going to be a successful venture, a business plan, maybe some demographics of the amount of, cost to run this thing, your ramp-up time, how long it's going to take you to break a profit. So that type of stuff is things that I'm going to really want to see.
Okay, that sounds good.
Anybody else?
I
Thank
agree
you.
with
We
what you
appreciate
guys
you
said.
playing for it.
So, Mr. President, what then will be the next step for this? Will
The
it,
next step on this would be to go to the
Move it on to the
Yeah.
board.
board.
okay,
Yeah, well, I think we have some information that he's going to have to bring to us. It might be another committee. I think it's probably wise to do another committee on something like this versus just straight to the board.
Okay.
Does everybody agree with that? We're going to need to see some financials, some business plan, to even see if we're going to bring it into a vote.
Yeah, and that'll allow you to ask questions and have a fuller discussion.
And one of the nice things about the way that the BEDA is set up is the fact that they do have to come up with the cash up front. So we know that you're going to be invested in this wholeheartedly, but that we still have to be pretty cautious as to, what we're going to be using this program for. We certainly want to see it be a success. But we don't want to be a deterrent to applying for it.
okay.
Yep.
Moving on to our next item, in regard to Maze Lounge, special use permit. Maze Lounge is a video gaming establishment proposed at 211 South Main Street across from Village Hall in the Bartlett Town Center. I would defer explanation then to Mr. Ponzinski.
Thank you, Trustee Gabrenya. This maze is back to you after having gone to the Plan Commission for the public hearing on its special use for their liquor license to serve beer and wine. I'm showing just a floor plan of Maze Lounge. It is in the Bartlett Town Center. Just some pictures of one of their other venues that they have opened. It is a video gaming facility. It's 1,587 square foot establishment, including the lounge area and 12 seats, as well as the 5 games, which you can see in this picture. The state law requires them to obtain our liquor license before they can get a state gaming license. They are within the parameters of what the state gaming license would allow. There's 6 employees potential. The parking in this town center is certainly large enough to accommodate this use. Plan Commission did recommend approval, subject to the conditions and findings of fact, and the minutes of their meeting are attached, and it is here for you to discuss prior to going on for a final vote on this special use. And Angela from Maze is in the audience.
Well, Jim, you bring up an interesting point about parking, and even though you say that there's plenty of parking for the town center area, inevitably, when people park in a business, they go in from the very front. And I've been over to the Arts in Bartlett and O'Hare's and that area with the pizza place, and finding a parking spot in that strip in that area is not easy often. And so I have an issue, or it seems to me that that's going to congest that area even more with bringing in someone else who's potentially going to bring in even more parking issues to that issue right there.
The town center parking has been established for these numbers of spaces. They have O'Hare's, there's Arts in Bartlett, so there is a lot of activity in there. And I put up the site plan, the overall site plan, and the majority of the parking is in the rear. So we do have some parking right along the front, but as you have gone over there and gone to Two Toots or O'Hare's or Arts in Bartlett, that's taken up first, and there's signs directing people to park in the rear. I'm sure that Maze will have the same kind of parameters. There is a walkway that cuts from the rear parking through the front, so people can take advantage of that or go around the center. So there's no intention to build any more parking, and another thing, it is shared with the units upstairs, which are the residential units.
I've always had trouble finding parking in the front, but there's always been parking in the rear for me, so I've never had an issue when visiting some of the other businesses over there. So that's just my experience.
I guess if you don't mind walking from the back, then it's not an issue. You
Yeah.
walk from the
I
back.
think all those businesses have entrances in the back, don't they?
Well, I don't think that you would be allowing access to the building from the back, would you?
Yeah, our floor plan does show that we actually sectioned off what would normally be like our back room into its own separate space so that people can come from the back. But just to add, we have done like a parking study, and it's estimated that max we should need 6 parking spaces. But just to add, whether it's us or anybody else going in there, you're going to have the same parking issue. So I don't think that's something that's relative to Maze necessarily in particular.
I'd have to agree with that. Any business that moves in, that'd be an issue.
If he has any questions, I'm happy to
I don't have
answer.
any.
Yeah, we just opened Niles actually Friday, and we opened Berwyn today. So we had 2 new openings. We now have 4 completely open. So just kind of.
What is your estimated from the time, if approval happens, till build out and opening? What is that timeframe?
So sometimes it depends on how quickly we get everything through. So with Bartlett, we actually already have all of our building permits approved. We just can't have them until we're approved for a liquor license. So we would be able to start building pretty quickly. Our build out takes about 30 days. However, once we get the liquor license, the state liquor license, I believe, takes about 2 weeks, assuming there's no questions on the applications. And then it's the Illinois Gaming Board that can potentially take up to 60 days at times, and then you have to wait for their next meeting, which is generally 30 to 45 days between. So it just depends when things line up. If we get our application into the IGB, we can usually get our inspection done pretty quick. And then, so I think middle of September is the next meeting. There's no way we're going to make that one. However, I think the following one would be, I think there's one in October or November, so we should be open by like end of October, end of November, being able to move along with all the steps in the process.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Move this on for a final vote then? Thank you.
All right, we have one additional item, and that is in reference to Gambit's ordinance amendment and special use permit. The petitioner is requesting to amend ordinance 199514 and receive a special use permit. Again, I would defer for more detail to Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gabrenya. Just putting Gambit's location, this is at the southeast corner of Apple Valley Drive and Route 59. The building has been here for some time. You heard Mrs. Boyd earlier. I did hand her email and those subsequent string of emails about her concerns with the business. This is an unusual situation in that this particular center had a PUD zoning on it that required a number of restricted uses. And one of the restricted uses is a restaurant, which is what the Gambit's owners would like to put in there. And then in your memo, the restaurant carryout, and any type of restaurant use were restricted in this particular ordinance. Therefore, in order to move this forward and for Gambit's to open up as a restaurant with video gaming, they need to amend that ordinance to include restaurants as a special use and also a special use to serve liquor, and also the special use for the liquor for their gaming license. The petitioners are, one of them is a Bartlett resident. They are proposing to take this 3,500 square foot facility, which was once Country Financial, and open it up into a restaurant that does have video gaming and move forward on that. This did go to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission recommended approval. As you see in the minutes of the Plan Commission, there was a condition about the relocation of the trash enclosure suggested by one of the Plan Commissioners, and that was placed on their recommendation. Unfortunately, with the configuration of the parking lot and with Groot, who is their trash hauler, it cannot be relocated to its current facility, and that there's several owners, it's again a condominium, they are all not in favor of moving it, and so it is in front of you with the trash enclosure basically being recommended for removal, but not physically possible. They did recommend trash, we did recommend trash is not picked up before 9, which Groot had agreed to. There's the floor plan here, there's also the menu. The petitioners are here if you have any direct questions for them, and they are hoping to move this forward onto the village board, so if you have any questions, they're here.
I have a question. When you did your initial research on this property, I would think that you would have been aware, or you would have found out quite quickly that there was a restriction for a restaurant in that. And that zoning has changed once before. Now, you're asking the village board to change it again to allow restaurant. Why did you pursue that location? It doesn't make sense to me. Practically, I would have found a different location.
We did have our...
Because basically what you're doing is you're putting your future in this business in the hands of this village board. And if we don't change that zoning for you, it's not going, you'll have to find a different location. So I'm curious, why did you pursue this and why did you pick that location? And why didn't you research something else?
We did look at a few locations within Bartlett, one being in Bartlett Plaza. This location is the one that had everything we were really looking for in a location. Right off of 59 and Stearns, which is a good area. It's growing, there's lots of new things coming in there. Also, it's been vacant for a couple of years, so obviously, you know, it was kind of a push to get in there, get something in there for the village, as well as for the other owners and the condo association as well.
And it's one of those rare instances where we can actually purchase the building down the road. So we are in a lease agreement now with the option of purchase. The owner currently is in Florida and is hoping to sell the unit, which we would love to utilize and purchase eventually. So it's one of those rare oddities that actually happen, which in our favor would come out to making us more money as well as staying in Bartlett and just our whole entire future to rest upon it, we understand. But when we look through a lot of the rest of Bartlett Plaza, downtown Bartlett, there wasn't enough space. If you can see, this location has about 3,800 total square feet. We want to be able to provide a big environment for everybody to mix and mingle, even though we want to be exclusive in numbers, but we want it to be more comfortable for everybody. We don't want you just to be shoved in a little area to eat your food or enjoy a glass of wine.
And also being a resident in Bartlett, my heart was set on Bartlett, and I refused to look anywhere outside of Bartlett. So we were kind of limited in that aspect to what was available.
Jim, obviously this is a video gaming endeavor, and my question is, to the best of my recollection, I cannot place another video gaming facility this close to a residence. Can you help me with that? Is there any other place that has some place this close? I mean, obviously you could walk out the back door, jump the fence, and you're in the back of the property of the residence. I can't think of any place else in town commercially where we're this close to a residence with this sort of a gaming facility.
Bannerman's is pretty close.
Yeah, there's a
And
whole
Stella's
street.
on 59 as well.
Shelby's and Stella's
They're
are
all right in front of
both within
another
maybe
restaurant.
300 feet of a residence.
Those are a couple. In terms of actual distance, you know, we'd have to go out and measure it, but this this facility, as you know, and I can pull up the air photo, is, you know, really right next door to, whereas Shelby's and those other ones, it's not quite on here, but you have to go across the street. And, but Shelby's has residents right behind it, and this one right here has residents. Bannerman's is the one that you got to go across the street to get a residential use, so.
And I would like to stress that we're shooting for the restaurant, we're a Cajun restaurant, and that's what we want to provide. Even though we're a 21 and over environment, we're just hoping that we are a restaurant. We just don't want to hurt ourselves by not offering the gaming experience.
Correct. We do have that private space. We also have another intimate room as well, plus our office will be there. So it is a restaurant with just so happens to have the gaming.
So let's put out a hypothetical then, since you apparently would like to be a fusion restaurant. Would you be willing, under the circumstances, to put off doing video gamings for the first year while you endeavor to promote the restaurant part of things?
We've already been asked that question, and to be perfectly honest, we all know what kind of revenue that gaming brings in. And we're really looking forward to that, to support our business, support ourselves, to purchase the building. And also, we've volunteered for many community events. We're going to be sponsoring a storyteller at upcoming Bartlett Heritage Days. We also hosted a table that had quite a popular turnout at National Night Out. So that would also give us the opportunity to give back to the community as well.
But ultimately, you're just a video gaming place.
No.
I would have to completely disagree with that. We have a full-scale restaurant with our full-scale commercial kitchen, larger than most, if we can, Batterman's per se. We have just about the same size. We have a 10-foot commercial range going in, a commercial hood, where you have a full-scale restaurant.
We have a full menu. Nothing is frozen. Nothing is complimentary.
Everything's fresh.
This is a little different than Maze, I would say, and the staff worked with them.
Different.
And they do
We're actually
have a
charging
full.
for most of our food. Nothing would be comped. We are not in partnerships to comp money or to comp food in order to get a return back. Everything is charged for.
I noticed you at National Night Out, and I think we're always excited when we see a Bartlett resident that wants to invest in the community, and please don't give up on Bartlett.
Thank you.
I think there's some opportunities in the village for you. I wonder, Platform 18, that seems to be going really nowhere very fast, so maybe that would be a good location. I think this location is very challenging for you for a variety of reasons. So I guess I would just encourage you to reach out to whoever you could potentially find another site.
Well, unfortunately, especially with downtown Bartlett location, our first location kind of just deterred us away from the downtown area. Just there's a lot of traffic, but there isn't enough traffic, especially for the fresh bagels and donuts and things that we do offer in the morning time. We don't have that traffic this way. And then being that we want to experience the wine as well as the whiskey environment, we don't have that traffic throughout the downtown.
Plus, we
Bartlett
don't
as
want to
well.
take away from the existing Bartlett businesses. We don't want to be in competition directly with O'Hare's.
There's a lot that
We do, yeah, so we don't want to do that. We'd rather work with them. Peggy is a great lady, so I don't want to get on her bad side and open up right across the street. So this was a prime location, so we're kind of off of that, bringing something great into Bartlett so that we're not traveling to Schaumburg to get a glass of wine or Geneva. It is challenging, but obviously we've toughed this out for the last few months. We've paid a lot of money to be here, so we are up for that challenge. We hope that it goes in our favor.
Jim, do you have a diagram of the complete, or the entire shopping center?
Just this air photo. I don't have.
Wow, we didn't spend a lot of money on that, did we?
This is our
Now,
GIS.
what unit, what are they talking about occupying?
This, I have a picture of their unit. If you look at, and I don't know if you can kind of see the rest of it, but this is where the Country Financial, this is the 3,500 square foot space that they hope to occupy.
There's 3 separate units. That last corner location is 3 separate units.
So that would be in the south section or north section?
The south.
The south section.
South section.
Artist Senior
So-
Living is directly to the right.
Okay.
Here is the other units that are in there. There's an orthodontist and I can't remember, but
Dentist?
So in essence,
Nail salon and
Probably a chiropractor and a pizza place somewhere.
the unit that you're occupying is actually not really adjacent.
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all.
Speaking of money, the one thing that I am most concerned about is what do you anticipate spending on a build-out?
Are already roughly about 120,000 in, and we have a total budget of 348 just in our applications as well as our contractors bidding it now that are all ready to go once we can kind of get forward.
So your build-out's going to be close to $500,000?
Correct. All in.
And what's your eventual break even on something like this?
We should break, and this is another reason on why we hope the gaming, and once we found out that we could get offering onto the gaming side, we should break even in about 2.5 years, and then hopefully purchase within the 3.
Did I understand you correctly that you're into it now for approximately $125,000?
That's correct.
Just in the equipment alone that we have already purchased, as well as the furniture and decor.
It's not this location specifically.
Right.
It has been recently, just to get onto the lease, as well as the months that we've been paying, as well as water, utilities.
The deposits on everyone, because we do have to secure everyone.
Yes,
So when
every
we get
single
the
one
okay.
acted as a different unit, so it cost a lot of extra money.
Yeah, I noticed the dumpster out front.
Yes, so we're anticipating hopefully, because we are removing and replacing everything. It's been years since anything's been updated. Fox Valley has walked through the unit. A lot of it is non-compliant as it is currently, so we have to rechange all the sprinklers. So we're anticipating the moment that we can to start the build out.
You know, from a zoning standpoint, this piece is very unusual. There's an old ordinance, effectively a PUD ordinance, that listed what uses were permitted. It was a standard B1 and B2 excerpt from the zoning ordinance from 1987, and on top of that, they deleted what would normally be permitted uses to be more restricted. And I don't recall it, but I can only imagine some of that was because neighbors were concerned and raised issues about what the uses would be in that center. I know there was some other issues with respect to the developer, and I can't say how much of the list that came together was because of some animosity with the developer and how much of that may have been input from neighbors. But it contemplated, it had special uses, and it had excluded uses, one of which was a restaurant. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean ordinances can't be amended. It also had a tie-in in the ordinance to their declaration of condominium and to their bylaws that were recorded, and those tied together. And it's not our job to do legal work for petitioners, and particularly where there's neighbors and other people affected by the proposed zoning. There is some evidence that the other owners in the center have consented. It's not formal enough. If the board were to consider amending this ordinance, they still have to have the declaration, or at least the bylaws amended, consistent. Now, you know, it's a chicken egg. Where do they start? They wouldn't go through that process unless the board was somewhat receptive. It was very clear that if there was going to be a change in any uses, it had to come back to the village board. And there are some changes, with one being the vacancy and all. I'm not going to argue, you know, in favor or against, but it is an unusual, it goes back to your comments relative to why this spot, when, you know, the use you're looking at is prohibited. It's not a standard B1 where it's a permitted use. It's not even a special use. It was specifically excluded for this particular property.
Is everybody ready to take a straw poll or no?
Pardon?
We don't want to waste any more of their time. Are we ready to take a straw poll on this? been bantering around with this for a while, so let's either send it to the board for a vote, or we take a straw poll now.
Well, I think it's important and it's fair to these people that if we wouldn't ultimately pass this, that they need to move on
That's exactly what I mean.
and find a more fertile field.
From what I'm hearing, it doesn't look favorable. So that's, nothing against what you're proposing here.
I think it would be, completely, it's kind of biased, especially right next door to us is a whole strip center that
Full of
pertains all
restaurants.
restaurants. So it's kind of, to me, I get it, it's a condominium association, it's everything like this. But to disclude a restaurant coming into that area that every owner there is in full favor of, as well as a lot of the residents in Bartlett, just because that they don't offer it now that there's a restaurant, and the current use, it's vacant for so long. If you look down to the strip center next to us, they haven't had a vacancy besides the one vacancy that's been open.
I 100% understand what you're saying, but understand that what you're asking us to do is to keep you on this string longer and potentially have you go into more expenses. So I'll go around and I will ask a specific question. Do you think it's worth sending this to the board, yes or no? Do you think it's worth sending this to the board, yes or no?
No.
Do you think it's worth sending this to the board, yes or no?
No, not at this point.
Yes or no to the board?
No.
Thank you.
And I think the primary objective there was the location. Certainly not the concept, certainly not the plan.
I think the concept is exciting.
Very
Wonderful
exciting.
to keep it in town.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Gabrenya.
Thank you.
We will be adjourning the committee meeting to an executive session. Will the clerk please call a roll?
Trustee Ranky?
Yes.
Camera?
Yes.
Carbonaro?
Yes.
Daney?
Yes.
Gabrenya?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
We didn't go.